Experimentalism is cinema at its most uninhibited, pushing the boundaries of concept, form, and technique.
Boo!
Pretentious. Hey, look, those are totally valid opinions, but it doesn't just exist in the vacuum of this so-called artistic elite. In fact, experimentalism might have had a greater influence on the stuff you love than you think. Now, this will not be the definitive essay on the subject, but a presentation of what this cinema-ism has to offer. Perhaps this will mark the beginning of your journey into experimental film. Or perhaps you'll be satisfied with this minimal examination that will hopefully enrich your movie-going experience. Third option is you aren't even here, perhaps watching something else that could very well be experimentalist in nature. By definition, experimentalism can't really be confined to a hard label. There are, however, some telltale signs. In general, experimental films are primarily devoid of narrative. There is an emphasis on the visual, asynchronous sound, and a lack of consideration for the audience. Experimentalism flagrantly rejects the traditional cinema language like continuity and structure, so you may see use of jump cuts, blurred focus, scratched or painted frames. These qualities are embraced in order to create subjective experiences free from the shackles of logic, and a fresh perspective with which to view the world we occupy. If you were to make a family tree of experimentalism, it might look something like this. If you were to put it in the form of a swine, it might look something like this. And if you were to mush it all together, it might look like this. The birth of the experimental film dates back to the avant-garde movement of the 1920s. The French Dadaists produced films based on the idea of perpetual movement by altering the film speed, exploring camera angles, and creating abstractions that propel the viewer through a visual experience. Surrealists use movies to further explore subjective narratives, the most famous being Un Chien Andalou, which perfectly showcases the use of dream logic and effective imagery to tell a story? Meanwhile, the Soviets experimented heavily with editing. The timing of cuts and the juxtaposition of shots were used to elicit emotion and generate new intellectual concepts from seemingly unrelated images. Film matured as a medium throughout the 30s and 40s, giving way to a new wave of avant-garde artists such as Maya Deren. Deren's work puts an emphasis on the body, both as a subject to explore and as the most vital piece of film equipment. Her film Meshes of the Afternoon engages in a circular narrative structure with repeating motifs, keeping the viewer's sense of reality always in question. The 50s and 60s brought forth a new attitude to the experimental film, which sought to disrupt mainstream cinema. French-Romanian filmmaker Isidore Isou encompassed the letterist ideology, which considered mainstream movies too rich and bloated. His manifesto Venom and Eternity boasted the destruction of the cinema. The images are completely disjointed from the sound. The celluloid is abused with bleach, while Isou makes a mockery of the movie-going audience.
C'est que les spectateurs viennent au cinéma pour avaler leur petite dose de tendresse dominicale et hebdomadaire.
Meanwhile, Kenneth Anger used the medium to shine a light on subject matter deemed too obscene for mainstream American audiences. As one of the country's first openly gay filmmakers, Anger blazed the trail of queer cinema. Not only did he open the door for on-screen depictions of gay culture, his 1963 film Scorpio Rising is considered to be the first drama to feature a pop music soundtrack, thus making Anger the forefather of the music video.
Well, I've never been invited to make one, but I accept that, because I was doing it before they were.
Some of the most impactful experiments in movie making came out of the structural films of the 60s and 70s. These films were constructed using strict, self-imposed rules that highlighted the power of technique and examined the viewer's interpretation of the image. Hollis Frampton explored spatiality with a single static shot of a lemon continually changing in appearance as the light source moves. Mieko Shiomi pushes shutter speed to the extreme in this slow-motion shot of the nearly imperceptible movement of a human smile. Michael Snow's 45-minute film Wavelength contains characters and plot operating within the illusion of a continuous zoom. While his film Back and Forth utilizes strict pans and tilts in a kind of demonstration in perception. Concept artists like Yoko Ono defined film not as a product in and of itself, but as an idea. As a product, Yoko's film, entitled Rape, is merely a camera following an increasingly agitated woman who may or may not be a willing participant. But as a concept, it is a violation in which the audience actively participates. The framing tightens to a claustrophobic crescendo that reflects the female experience as well as life as a celebrity couple.
Lass mich ja überhaupt nicht mehr in Frieden. Du, der steht mit seiner Kamera hier und ich kann nicht hinaus. Verstehst du denn das nicht?
With film studies fully established, more and more filmmakers engaged in experimentalism as a means to discover their voice.
Why does he waste his time with this? A fella like that, he probably could drive a truck, do something constructive, make a shoe.
Just take a look at the earliest works of your favorite directors. You may be surprised to find how it has impacted their work throughout their careers.
It's the definition of your job to be exploring, to be evolving, to create new knowledge.
Now that we find ourselves in this postmodern world where movie genres blend and borrow from the past, it is increasingly common to spot the influence of experimental film. And now that you know just a little bit about it, you're never gonna not notice it. In general, experimental films are primarily devoid of narrative. There is an emphasis on the visual, asynchronous sound,
I prefer staying home, me.
and a lack of consideration for the audience. Experimentalism flagrantly rejects the traditional cinema language like continuity and structure, so you may see use of jump cuts, blurred focus, scratched or painted frames. These qualities are embraced in order to create subjective experiences free from the shackles of logic, and a fresh perspective with which to view the world we occupy. At times it may be confusing, frustrating jump cuts, and seemingly pointless jump cut that without blurred for the other jump cuts should be focus. But it's important to always remember